Liberty. Ionescu, truth. Jonquel Jones with a tough one.
Stewie, little shoulder shake. Oh, what a shot!
Fiebich with the move down the lane. Cloud into the paint. Reverses it in. The New York Liberty are WNBA champions.
Hey, Liberty fans, it's Felicia and François, and welcome back to the podcast. The Liberty just picked up 2 huge wins, taking down the Aces on Tuesday and pulling off a wild comeback against Atlanta on Sunday. Leonie Fiebich is stepping up in a big way, and Sandy Brondello's new lineups are making waves. Let's dive into the biggest themes and what it all means for New York moving forward. François, let's get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it. And as we told you before, let's not press the panic button just yet with the New York Liberty. They have to figure things out without Jonquel Jones. We just had Leonie Fiebich back, and you saw that we went through a lot of emotions, but I think it's actually probably a good thing that we're going through those trials and tribulations without Jonquel Jones, because we could see what this team is made of. And don't get me wrong, we've had a couple of tough games, a tough road trip, but I feel like this week has been a crucial week for the New York Liberty. It might be actually a turning point for them, because when you see the contribution from the bench and Leonie Fiebich stepping up offensively, that could be really helpful for the Liberty once Jonquel Jones is back. What do you think of, what we've seen so far and how some of the players, especially from the second unit, have been able to step up in their absence?
I think this is pushing the second unit to be better and better every game because, I think, they had a tough road trip. The bench did what they could, but I think they also have to take it on the chin and realize they got to be better because now we require, the team requires a lot more from them. With the absence of JJ, it's always that next man up mentality, and you got to give it your all. And you got to stay ready when your number's called. Whether, JJ's in the lineup or not, as part of kind of next second unit for this team, you always have to stay ready because you never know when that number's called, and whatever minutes you play, you got to just do your best and try to do it to the best of your ability, whether offense or defense or both. And for the Liberty, you've seen how there's times where I would say that for the second unit, there's a little bit of a learning curve because, some of the lineups that, Sandy would kind of switch and play around with, some people may not be as comfortable. But I think here, what you're seeing is that they're learning on the fly to get it together. They're learning on the fly to be more aggressive. They're learning so much more just of how to be pushed further and further. I think last year when you think about everyone that came off the bench, you had your full squad. You had everyone there. Bonija, even though she was injured for part of the season, she was pushing. Everybody was pushing. So even the bench, I think that inspired them, but they still didn't get as many minutes as somebody like Kennedy Burke and Izzy Harrison, the minutes that they're getting, they got to push and they got to work even harder, in the absence of JJ. And JJ is a huge piece for this team. We know that. We know this team needs JJ to make the long run. If you're trying to win a second chip, you need JJ, but you also need her healthy. So I rather JJ being out, next man up, make sure JJ is fully healthy and not coming back too early so she can be there for their run in the later half of the season. Now,
the player that obviously is very important for the New York Liberty, and everybody was waiting for her to come back from the Eurobasket, is Leonie Fiebich. Mm-hmm. But however, though, sometimes we're so used to her being so good, bouncing around from playing in Europe, then coming back to the WNBA, play she hasn't had a break, but it seems like it doesn't bother her. But I feel like for this season, it has been a little more challenging for her. Let's remember that she finished her season in Spain pretty late, so she wasn't part of the training camp with the New York Liberty. She arrived just less than a week before the opening game against the Las Vegas Aces. She only played maybe dozens of games before she had to head back to Europe to play the Eurobasket with Germany. And then, she missed 3 weeks and a half of competition, came back with the Liberty, and had to readjust. Now, yes, she has the experience of last year, but it's complicated to having to adjust to 3 different offensive systems, the one with a Spanish team, the Liberty, and the German national team. So, she did say that it was going to take her a bit of time. However, statistically, if you look at her usage, she only has a 10% usage. That means that, she's not taking a lot of shots, so she's not involved a lot offensively. And Stewie, Sab, and Sandy have said that she needs to be more aggressive. And I think it's a mindset, but it's also maybe putting some systems up for her to put her in the best situation. She had only scored 7 points in the loss against the Seattle Storm prior to those 2 games this week. So a change had to be made. And it was pretty obvious the game against the Las Vegas Aces that it was going to be a different game for Fiebich. I mean, the first play was a set play for her. Everybody was on the weak side, and they let her just cook whoever was against her. And that was very rare for her to take the initiative and just create a play for herself. And every time also that she had space to take a free, she took it. But what was different also was that they set up plays for her to have the ball in the paint. And with her height and athleticism, whoever is defending on her was not going to be able to sustain and defend against her. So that was the obvious change that we saw in the Vegas game. And we hope that she would continue that way against the Atlanta Dream and didn't miss a beat either. She just continued. I mean, she was 100% from the field for a long time. She was 4 for 4 from the 3-point line. She had made all the shots, and I think the first missed shot came in the second half. So Fiebich is a crucial part of that team, and if she starts, scoring like she's doing, maybe we won't feel the absence of Benajeleni as much as we did for a little while.
That's very true. I totally agree with that, because I think for a little bit you were wondering, like, I always thought Fiebich is that girl. Like, yeah, she's an amazing defender, but we need some offense from her as well. And we know she has it in her bag. But when that wasn't really happening, it was like, okay, if Sab has an off night or Stewie has an off night, who else is going to step up? And you just didn't know. It felt very lopsided to me if either one of those two, because let's face it, without JJ, yes, you rely more on Stewie and Sab, but others do have to step up. And yes, Fiebich is doing great defensively, but we need some points, especially if they get into a hole. You need somebody who's going to come in, and she has such a pure shot, and she can get her own shot. But I think what we would see, especially in the beginning of the year with Fiebich, was like she would defer a lot to Stewie and Sab and other players. And, if she was wide open, she would take the shot, but she would usually defer. So it was important. And even hearing Stewie talk about it the last game, like talking about how many shots she took against the Aces, and that everybody knows, like, we need you to take more. We need you to do more on the offensive end. You're doing fabulous on the defensive end. But as I've said, Fiebich is that girl. We watched some of her games overseas, so you see that she is a big leader for her teams over there. And I know she may feel like, adjusting, coming back to New York, adjusting to a different league. You don't have to be the number one person to lead because you have so many leaders on this team. So you may feel more inclined to defer. But I think now, what she's seeing is like, no, you're part of the starting lineup. You are just as important as Sab and Stewie and whomever else is starting, Cloud, KB, whomever's on that floor. You are just as important, and you are important on the offensive end.
Yeah, I think what was also very important is, and she also mentioned, is the fact that she felt that, the team has not done necessarily a good job involving the people that stay in the corners as much. Players like Fiebich, players like Marine Johannès that would stay in the corner. We know their abilities to shoot the free, but sometimes when the team get a little stagnant, you need to involve them a little bit more. And so, there was one play against the Las Vegas Aces, very simple play. Stewie just set a screen in the corner for Marine. That had a wide open shot, assisted by Jalen Sherrod. And with a shooting ability, it was money. You also saw Fiebich doing ghost screens so that she could get in the paint and Sab was able, with her passing ability, to find her and be her opponent. So those things are very important. But the defense is also a crucial element that the team is going to need if they want to go all the way.
Yeah.
And obviously having Fiebich back is a huge boost for the team because she's such a unique player, a 6'4" player that could, defend on your best guard or your best point guard, and also a forward. We got to talk about her defense once again against Chelsea Gray. Chelsea Gray by now must be having nightmares of Leonie Fiebich, because if you look back at last season, the way she's been defending against her all season long and the playoff as well, and then this past game on Tuesday, I mean, that was incredible. And the fact that, even after today's game against Atlanta, Leonie Fiebich was asked in the post-game conference about what is it about defense that she likes so much, because she always said that that's her thing, that's her bread and butter, the defense. And she said, honestly, I just have fun on defense. On defense, you really always know what you have to do, the aggression you play with, and the intensity, and that's just something you can control. She was mentioning the fact that if you're a player that solely focus on the offense, you're gonna have off nights. You're gonna have nights where you're not necessarily shooting well, and we've seen with Stewie and Sab that it can happen to the greatest. But the defense, on the other hand, if that's something that you put your mind into it, that you're really good at, you know what to do. You're gonna bring that intensity no matter what, and that cannot fault you if you're physically at the very best.
Yeah, that's true. I think for Fiebich, her defense is what, when she came to this team, you still had Benaja on the team, for instance.
Yeah.
So when Fiebich would come off the bench, really, her offense was great, but you really looked to her more for her defense, which she did a fantastic job with as well. And now you need both, with Benaja not being there and now JJ out, and you hopefully no one else gets injured, fingers crossed. But you need her to step up in this new kind of era for the Liberty. Like, she is on the rise, and I just think that she's going to be such a critical part to the starting five. And she is that critical part to the starting five, just like JJ. And the Liberty, to me, they have the bigs, they have the length. I think that is one of the biggest strengths for the Liberty, is their length on that floor. You have Fiebich 6'4", Stewie. It's crazy to me that Fiebich looks a little bit smaller
but they're the same
Stewie,
height.
but they're the same height.
Yeah.
And then you got JJ, you got Nyara, you got Izzy. I mean, they can really stretch the floor for you. And so with Fiebich having these two big games, I hope that will just she will gain that momentum into every game now, because I don't think players gonna have to respect her driving to the bucket or being in that corner. She shoots with confidence. She doesn't think too much about it, and she has such a pure shot. It really is. Sandy is correct. It is a beautiful shot, and she's just on it. And I think that also comes from her defense and how she is so in tune with her defense. She knows what she needs to do, and I know she said it's not the same when you're on offense, but you can tell she's locked in. When she's locked in, she's going to do what she needs to do to make sure the play is done the right way. Yeah.
Now, let's move on to, and I briefly mentioned it a couple of minutes ago, is the New York Liberty's defense. And I think, we always talk about the New York Liberty's offense and how many great players they have on their rosters, but without a defense, you're not going to win championship. Nico Harrison said it, even though he's not there yet. But the defense is also what helps the offense. And when you look at the Liberty in those two games, now we're still waiting for full performance for the New York Liberty. They've been able to, perform greatly for 15, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, but they haven't so far performed a full 40 minutes of great basketball. Mm-hmm. When you look at the game against the Las Vegas Aces, that was probably one of the games where they produced the most complete performances in a very long time. Mm-hmm. But in the third quarter, once again, the infamous third quarter, they were down by 7 after a couple of minutes. Sandy had to take a timeout. And after that timeout, that's when the Liberty woke up, led by Kennedy Burke, who had 4 steals in that quarter, having a record of 6 steals in the game. That really helped the Liberty up the tempo, having easy baskets and transitions. But it was just the mindset and the intensity. once they started to have the intensity on defense, being disruptive, it kind of fueled the crowds. It got them going. And I felt like even though the score was close all throughout the games, once they took over in the third after being down by 7, you never felt like the Aces were going to take over the game. And especially with Asia Wilson getting injured in the second quarter, it clearly gave an advantage to the Liberty. Now, this other game against Atlanta, that was even worse because they were down by 19 and you felt like, wait, they had 4 days of rest and times to practice. You know, I was expecting a great performance from the get-go. Yeah. But no, only 11 or 13 points in the first quarter, down by 19 in the second. Everything was going against them at the beginning of the third, not getting any calls. The Atlanta Dream had 16 more free throws than the New York Liberty in this game. Wow. That would be for another topic. But I think the turning point was when Natasha Cloud got a tech and she was on the bench. She was heated. She was like I had not seen her in a while. Yeah. Heated on the bench. She got the tech, and I think that got the team going because from that moment on, they were on fire on all cylinders, defense, offense, and slowly but surely they made their comeback. Yeah, what did you make of the defense of the Liberty when they locked in? Like, they're almost unstoppable.
Well, I think that was sparked by Natasha Cloud getting that tech. And she had every right because there were a few plays, when Sabrina was coming down the court where maybe one play could have been, they kept saying that the defender got all ball, but twice. The first one, we'll give you that. Yeah. There's potential, they got all ball on that. But the second time, you look at that, I was like, there's no way. They didn't just get all ball, but it's tough because I think, you're trying to be aggressive. I mean, Stewie took shots in this game and that they didn't get called for. Stewie got decked and she hit the deck real hard. And
I remember even the first play, she got hit in the nose.
Yeah, she got hit in the nose and she made the shot, but that should have been an and one. Another play, she hit the deck, no call. She went back up the court and they're talking to the ref and it just felt like, all the calls were basically going to Atlanta. When the Liberty were being aggressive in the paint, they weren't getting the calls, barely. And so you could understand the frustration from Natasha Cloud, but I think that did spark the rest of her teammates to really respond and step up and really not let Atlanta have much space. I think in the first half, BG kind of could do what she wants. I mean, BG's a fantastic player, but the minute BG gets the ball in her hand and she turns around, there's not much you can do unless you jump up and try, and it's likely going to be a foul. So it's not much you can do when she gets into the post and she gets to her spot. But in the second half, I think they really picked it up and, at times double team BG and just made it hard. They just made it harder and they really got down to what they needed to do as a defensive team. They really got back to their principles because I would say the first half was definitely, Sandy's right, it was a tale of two halves. The Liberty were not executing at all. They're not the team we are used to seeing. And then the second half, they came back out and I think the first half was their gut punch to wake up and let's get this going. And led by Stewie and Fiebich, they got in their bag. But I have to say, the crowd at Barclays, that, I'm really happy the Liberty are home for the month because I do think, they always appreciate the crowd so much. And it's true. When the crowd gets into it, it's almost like the crowd is that sixth teammate sitting there with you. Like
there's an energy that...
there's a shift that happens in Barclays because they start making shots and the crowd gets behind them. The crowd gets louder and louder and it just energizes them. And then you just see how the Liberty react to that, how we just kind of pump that energy. The crowd pumps that energy back into them and they lock in.
Yeah, I think it's an energy like I've never seen before. Like once the crowd gets going, but it's a give and take, right? I mean, you have the fans that are pushing the team, but they also need to see efforts from the Liberty. So all it takes is one play, one spark from one player, the crowd gets going, and then it just boosts everybody. And it's just for 5 or 6 minutes, it's like nothing can happen to them because you got the crowd pushing and being so loud. And it's really overwhelming for the other team. And it was funny because Izzy Harrison, after the game, she was saying I always hated that venue when I played for another team because it was just like so high. Now I'm like on the good side of it, and now I can see how it's pushing the team. So that was great. But I think what was very important, especially in the game against Atlanta, since the Vegas game, Asia didn't play the full game, was to figure out how to control the paint, because the last time those two teams faced each other in Atlanta had scored 62 points in the paint. Bree Jones and BG completely dominated the paint against the Liberty, and yes, JJ was not there, but I felt like, and you also have to keep in mind that they had travel for the day prior to that game, from the West Coast to the East Coast, after a long road trip. So you almost felt like they were about to lose that game. But still, 62 points in the paint, that was way too much. So when you look at this game today, as we record after the game, the Atlanta Dream only scored 32 points in the paint, and the Liberty scored more points in the paint than the Atlanta Dream. So you cut by half the amount of points they score in the paint. And even though I was a little worried in the first half because BG was, she was dominating. She was dominating, and it was hard. Like, you could see it up close. It's hard to defend against such a physical player, and also had so much skills. But the second half, you gotta give props to both Izzy Harrison and Nyara Sabally. They did a tremendous job trying to be physical with them on defense. And it was funny because she also mentioned Izzy Harrison that BG came to see her after the game, and she was surprised by how physical she could be. She wasn't expecting her to match her physicality. So, she gave her a respect. And Nyara Sabally, who was a little timid, I would say, at the beginning, having few fouls, being a little, hesitant on offense. She brought that energy in the second half. She ended up with 4 blocks, and some of them were crucial down the line. So big shout out to Izzy Harrison and Nyara Sabally for trying their best to contain Bree Jones and BG.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really tough to contain BG. I mean, she's a phenomenal player. And as I said, when she gets down in the post and she's at her spot, there's not much you can do. And Nyara did all she could, as did Izzy. And yeah, they had a couple of fouls there that you may say are questionable, but again, it's BG. They're going to favor the offensive player most of the time. But in terms of Nyara Sabally, she can take this as a badge of honor because she actually got a block on BG.
Yeah,
I gotta give it to her. I know it was tough, especially with that assignment, but you also got a block, which, hey, you got to block BG. You got a little badge of honor right now, no matter what else happened in the game.
And when you look at it, I mean, BG only ended up with 10 points. I'll be curious to see how many of those 10 points were scored in the first half versus the second half. Bree Jones only had 8 points, and those two players had, really dominated the previous matchup in Atlanta. So real props to both of them. And I want to mention one more thing about Izzy Harrison. She's been really, really good those past couple of weeks. I was a little worried at the start of the season. It seemed like she wasn't 100% healthy. The way she was moving on the court, you could tell that she was not, fully there just yet. But those past few weeks, she's been a real spark from the bench. And with JJ missing, I feel like now Sandy is trusting her and have full confidence in her ability to, bring something positive to the team. And that game today, not only defensively, but even offensively, she was attacking the basket. She was having, those offensive rebounds. I don't think we would have won that game if it wasn't for Izzy Harrison's contribution.
Yeah, for sure. Izzy is, I think, in these last few weeks, even during the road trip where they may have lost a couple of games, Izzy was a bright spot for the team. I would say that she stepped up and she came on the court and she did all she could to really help her team try to get some victories. And it didn't work out for a few games, but in these games at home, she's still the bright spot to me. I think today they had some trouble initially, I think, with BG and Bree Jones on the court because, it's just a tough matchup no matter who's on the court trying to defend them. But when Izzy came in, yeah, it was a little tough at first, but I think just the way she moves on the court and her speed allowed her to be a disruptor and to do just enough to disrupt. But also on the offensive end, she was going after the 50-50 balls.
Yeah.
Typically, I think that was one of the things that the Liberty don't seem to get a lot of. They don't tend to get a lot of offensive rebounds, but she was under that bucket. She was definitely under the basket trying to get those 50-50 balls and doing her best. And she got a few. I think did she get an and one? I think she did.
Yeah, she did.
And so, yeah, Izzy's been that bright spot for me. And I'd like to see her get more minutes as well. I know when JJ comes back, things kind of shift, but I do think she deserves more time out there on the court because she is a spark for them. But also, I have to say, for all the role players in this game, they stepped up. The first half wasn't so great, initially. But I will say, just having them come back in the second half and do better and be better, from Izzy to KB to Marine, they really got out there in the second half and just switched this game around. And yes, it was again led by Fiebich and Stewie. But I have to say, the lineup that Sandy had out there, which was Stewie, Fiebich, there was one point it was Izzy, but I think it became Nyara and Marine.
Yeah.
And that lineup really brought the Liberty back. And I think that's where I think Nyara also got her block on PG. And so they just came back and they didn't, some teams could get down and out and get defeated with having this 19-point lead. And the Liberty have, unfortunately been in this position before with Atlanta on their home court. But here it's like they just chipped away. And then before you know it, here we are, 5-point game, 3-point game tied. And now they took the lead.
Yeah, I think that was my next point. The focus on Sandy Brandello and her coaching. If you look back 2 years ago, I think the criticism were that, Sandy is relying way too much on the starting lineup, way too much on the stars, not trusting a bench that much. And then when you saw in the playoffs, they were gassed and it was hard against a tough Aces team. Last year, we had a lot of talent, so I think it was probably easier to rely more on your bench. But, in the end, you saw in the playoff, it was a 7 or 8 players rotation. Now, this year, I think it was pretty much sort of the same. But I think with all the injuries we've had, that kind of forced and pushed Sandy to be a little more creative and step out of her comfort zone and try different lineups. And I think, you look at the past few games, she hasn't necessarily used the same players for the same amount of minutes. The previous game, you had Kennedy Burke and Rebecca Gardner that played great minutes.
Yeah.
This game, Rebecca Gardner didn't play as much because obviously Atlanta is a much bigger lineup, and she used more lineup with a lot of bigs, similar to what she had tried against the Minnesota Lynx in Game 5. So I feel like Sandy is taking more risk, and I really hope that she continues that way to be less predictable. I like the fact that she's starting to bring more confidence to Fiebich and even Marine, because, just saying, I want Marine to be Marine, that's great that you give her that freedom, but you also got to put her in the best position to succeed. And I feel like she has done that a little bit more lately. Even when Marine had some down moments, she brought her back into the game, and everybody's really rooting for her to succeed, because with a player like this, there's a lot of up and down, but when she's on the high, she could really shift the momentum of the game. And we saw she had a couple of 2 clutch threes, that helped the Liberty tying the game and at some point taking the lead. So I like the fact that she's involving all the players. So that's one thing. And the other thing that worked really well in this game was to put Stewie more as the point guard, as the one. Because we saw in the last few games, Natasha Cloud got injured. She had a hip injury, so she didn't play the previous game. And you feel like lately Sabrina has had a lot of loads, had to carry the ball quite a bit. And obviously she's a freeway player. And she's been able to score a lot of points, have a lot of assists and rebounds. But I feel like at some point it gets a little too much for her. You see that her shooting efficiency is not, the same as the past few seasons. So helping Sab to be off the ball a bit more was a great idea. And, Leonie Fiebich, directly linked that switch with Stewie being the one at times as the reason why they won that game against Atlanta. She said that what really made us good in that third quarter is Stewie bringing up the ball, being the point guard, initiating the action, and making really smart decisions. We tend to forget that Stewie could pretty much play any position. She has a high IQ. She has tremendous passing skills as well. And I felt like that kind of liberated everybody. She could stretch the floor because if you have Bree Jones defending on Stewie, and that's forcing her to
come out of the paint.
Out of the paint.
Yeah.
So that brings more spacing and more opportunities in the paint as well. So what did you make of Stewie at the one position and how it helped the Liberty winning that game?
That was definitely a turning point for them because at that point, I would say Atlanta didn't really have an answer once Stewie was at the one. And that really helped the Liberty and propelled the Liberty. And Stewie is she's such a smart mind on the court and how she sees the court. And so having Stewie bring the ball up sets their defense differently because now the paint opens up just a bit more because somebody's going to have to come out and defend on Stewie. You have to. Or as we know, she sunk a 3 today. And she obviously, yes, her 3-point percentage went down a little bit, or went down a bit. But she's trying to get that back, and I believe it will come back. I think it will come back really strong at some point. But having her come up and bring the ball up was just helpful because I think it was harder for people like Tosh and Sab. You got Jordan Canada, who is also a great defender. Atlanta was just pesky on defense. And it's tough on your point guard. Whoever's going to be the point guard, it's tough when they're on you from the jump and you can't really get your play set up. But with Stewie and her height and her length, she now has this vision of the court and her teammates, and she can direct the offense. And she did a fantastic job tonight, and that's what also really led to this turnaround for them.
Yeah, because, on the night where the team overall didn't shoot particularly well, and it was mostly the two stars, Breanna Stewart and Sabrina Ionescu. If you combine their stats, they shot 10 of 39. Wow. Whereas the rest of the team was above 50% from the field. Wow. So that shows you that when the two stars don't necessarily have a great shooting night, they're still able to pull a win and have the other players contribute greatly and shoot over 50%.
Because I think one of the things that what also makes Stewie great is that, and Sab, is when they know they're having an off night, they're still going to shoot.
But they do so many other things.
But they do so many other things. Like, they know, like, all right, the shot's not going down. They're still going to shoot. They're still going to attempt. But they also know they can trust their teammates and they can do so many other things. They can do all the little things with assists and fighting for those 50-50 balls. Just making sure your team has every opportunity to get points on the board. Even if you're not the person making them, they're going to do all the little things to make sure their team can get ahead and get this one.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Stewie, she had 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, 2 blocks.
Wow.
Like, that's the all-around performance, and she had the biggest plus-minus on the team, +9, while she was on the court. So, that's a true leader right here. And even Sab, who was, 3 for 20, 0 for 7 from the 3-point line.
Night for her,
tough shooting night. And there was even a stretch where she stayed on the bench for quite some time in the third quarter. But she was still +4 while she was on the court. Had 5 assists, a very important assist. So, she will do whatever it takes to get the win. And, that was an important win against a tough opponent that, could come across our way, when it comes to the playoff. But that's an important win considering that, in the meantime, Seattle, has lost again after losing, not that long ago against Connecticut.
DC, thank you.
Yeah, they lost against the Washington Mystics. So they're trailing a little bit behind us now. So at the moment, it's a 3-team race. with Minnesota still at the top, but they dropped 2 games recently. And so they're at the top of the league, and right behind you have Phoenix and New York. So, you know, the season is long, but, you know, all those games are very important. And very soon we're going to have a team that causes also some problems, the Indiana Fever. 2 games at home. We faced them twice already, but those 2 games were in Indiana. And the calendar is a little bit weird because we're going to face them on Wednesday. And then we have the All-Star break, and then we're facing them again on the Tuesday. So very, very strange schedule. You know, that All-Star break that is in Indiana, so you know they're gonna see a lot of each other in the space of a week. But I'm definitely excited to see that game. Obviously there's gonna be a lot of hype with Caitlin Clark being back in New York. She doesn't necessarily have good memories of the Barclays Centers from last season, but definitely looking forward to that matchup, and we'll be there to cover those games. So thank you so much, guys, for listening to our podcast and your continued support. We really appreciate it. And as we always say, Felicia,
Let's go Liberty!